Two quick thoughts on the debacle that is President Biden's candidacy for the 2024 presidential election. First, President Biden and his team called for the debate in an effort to disprove the theories regarding his mental and physical state and his fitness for serving as president for another 4 years. That effort failed miserably, and in fact, the debate appearance raised questions about his ability to serve as president now, his fitness to serve as president now, mentally and physically. There is a perpetuation of denial amongst those in his inner circle and his family regarding the actual state in which President Biden finds himself at 81 years of age. And any of us who have experienced the aging of parents and grandparents and seen the inevitable decline that time takes on individuals once they begin a downward progression will recognize that President Biden, whatever you think about his politics, is in no condition to be serving as President of the United States. And the debate was in part at President Biden's own insistence, as he challenged President Trump to a debate, as he repeatedly has stated over the years. Look at what he's doing, look at how he handles things. Well, America looked, the world looked at the debate and found that he is not handling things well at all. The second thing that I find interesting is his constant referral, and those who support him and have supported him, at least up until now, to the fact that he is the only one who has defeated President Trump in an election contest. Well, if you want to look at elections for president and for candidacies for president, it doesn't seem to be an area that President Biden would want to call to attention. He ran for president prior to the current election cycle 3 times. The first time he had to leave the campaign because of plagiarism accusations and evidence of plagiarism in the past. And it was at a time when he was, in some ways, at the height of his career up to that point anyway, as he was chairing the Judicial Committees, Senate Judicial Committees hearings in the Clarence Thomas appointment to the Supreme Court. The second time he was running, he was dogged by persistent references to past statements that he had made that were viewed by many as, and certainly seemed to be racial in tone and intent. Whether they were intentional or not is perhaps debatable, as many things even in the past that President Biden said may not have actually been intentional. And often, in fact, he has been proven to have simply been lying in an effort to embellish or create stories and circumstances that put him in a positive light. And that has only gotten worse in the lead up to his run for presidency, and in fact, since he's been president. And if you want to look at records, yes, President Trump is 0-1 against President Biden when it comes to a head-to-head match for who's going to be elected for president of the United States. But the circumstances of 2020, and perhaps even now in many respects, post-COVID United States in so many ways, it makes it difficult to compare what went on then and even now in many respects to America's past. And the presidential election was no exception. And so whatever one feels about the election itself, the election results as they were counted and tallied and certified, presented the presidency to President Biden, now President Biden. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one oughtn't, and that we oughtn't to have had an investigation into how, in fact, elections were handled in different states vis-a-vis their own state laws and what the laws in the book said, notwithstanding the situation that we were dealing with in the era of COVID. But President Biden was 0 for 2 simply in seeking the Democratic nomination prior to 2020, when he almost became a default presidential candidate by virtue of an effort, some would suggest, to thwart the left flank of the Democratic Party from gaining power, particularly with respect to the nomination of candidate Bernie Sanders, as the Democratic Party, by most accounts, had done in the 2016 nomination process. And so things worked in many ways in President Biden's favor to secure the Democratic nomination and perhaps to secure the presidency itself. And so the history of President Biden as a presidential candidate is not as clear cut as "I'm the only one who has defeated President Trump" makes it appear. Besides the fact that now we are in a totally different environment with histories, presidential histories for both Biden and Trump to analyze, with an effort that hopefully will be made by people on both sides of the equation to consider the impact of COVID on the ending of Trump's presidency and the beginning of Biden's presidency, and how each individual, in fact, handled the situation to the benefit or detriment of the country. And so the final thing that I'll note in this regard is that Democrats have kind of painted themselves into a corner when it comes to the way they have handled presidential elections and the nominating process. The degree to which President Obama can be credited with resuscitating President Biden's hopes for and aspirations for the presidency by naming then Senator Joe Biden as his running mate. One might wonder what would have happened had that not happened. As I understand it, President Biden did not run for president when President Obama's term was coming to a close, in part because he was encouraged not to. It was Hillary Clinton's turn, and in part, as I understand it, because he and his family were still dealing with the loss of his son Beau and the tragedy that ensued there, and their need to deal with that privately. And most people then wrote off President Biden's presidential aspirations, which again were resuscitated by Obama and others in the way the 2020 campaign was handled. And then the other thing to note is that President Biden secured Vice President Kamala Harris's position, and the quandary that Democrats find themselves in when it comes to whether or not they're going to put her forward as a replacement for Biden, should he in fact step down. And so they've created their own issues, their own mess, so to speak. And so many would suggest that President Biden, as candidate Biden, failed the first test of a presidential candidate, namely in his selection of a running mate, by selecting Kamala Harris, who had to drop out of the nomination process because she couldn't even secure the support of her own home state. But now, at this point, we can see that President Biden has in fact failed the second, and what it may in fact failed a second time, what may in fact be the primary issue that every national politician ought to be asking themselves. What is it that I ought to do in order to secure the future of the country, as opposed to my own political and personal future? Thank you all very much. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for your time. I've got a couple other videos listed here if you'd like to take a look at those, and as I'd like to discuss issues related to politics, religion, society, and how in the world we're supposed to understand ourselves and life in the world. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.